so I might as well continue. Hi, Alun Burge again. Yesterday morning, when I came in, I was struck by how many people I'd not met before, and I didn't recognize, and but it's been great over the last couple of days having the chance to get to know so many people, and it's been lovely the way that people have just come up and started chatting. So I've really got a much better sense as to the people in the room. So, firstly, can I thank Catherine and the team for the effort that they've put in making this such an excellent event. Some of the sessions I attended have been brilliant, and I had really good feedback from various others. I now have the honour, responsibility, whatever, for the next short period to have a discussion essentially on where do we go from here? How do we take this forward? And the reason I wanted to come down here is that I promise you, when you're up there, it feels so far away from you. And for me, I just want us therefore to imagine we're all sitting around in a circle, because I don't just want this to be about me talking at you or to you. I want it to be as much as possible as a discussion as if we're all sitting around the same table, because the things that I want to say, essentially, I want you to be influencing the Welsh Assembly government as to what it is that we should be doing, but also you making linkages between yourselves and one another and connections as if we are not even here. Do you know, I can hear a really strange noise. Do we have any idea what this noise is? It's the voting machines.
Handset somewhere. That's the alarm on the little handset that's going off.
Can we, is it okay if we just try to sort this one out before we go any further? Yeah, I think we've cracked it. That's a good reminder, isn't it? You'll never forget. You don't take one of those home by accident. Blinking heck. But, I mean, what I'm going to do is sort of make a short introduction, which is a bit of a presentation, which picks up on some of the things the Minister said yesterday, some of the things which Mark Austin said, and some of the issues he identified. But essentially, I don't have a prescribed way, and the Welsh Assembly Government does not have a prescribed way that we want to take forward either the next 2 hours or what we do beyond that. I mean, for me, my preference would be that the people in this room were to say, we don't need the Welsh Assembly Government, this is something we can get on with and do ourselves. We'll call on you when we need your help. And if people feel that, then that would be wonderful. But essentially what I want this to be is a session which is as much about you making your contributions and thinking things through together as it is about me from the front. Now, it's not often the government officials stand up here with a sense of what they would like as their set outcome. So it's a bit edgy for me, so bear with us when we're around this. Also, the reason I'm doing a bit of an intro and covering things that have happened in the past 24 hours is that not everyone who's here today was here yesterday. So they wouldn't have heard what the Minister said, and they also wouldn't have heard what Mark Austin said. And I think those two contributions are helpful ones. So we'll have a little brief presentation. I moved to Swansea about 6 months ago. And for my pains, I bought a house. Well, I bought a shell. And so I become very good friends with the guy, the builders who were doing my house up. And so one evening a week through the autumn, I've sat down with Mike, who's the builder, and who's never been online before. And I've been encouraging him, and he's been open and willing and supportive, so that he's able to go online, and which has been an enjoyable experience. And I thought, good, that's my personal advance for this year. That was until I saw DK yesterday in his session. And at this point, I'm going to make an undertaking, this is the second digital inclusion conference I've spoken to. The last one was 2 years ago. Next time, I will not be using a slideshow presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, okay? Having seen DK yesterday, which blew my mind, I feel a bit embarrassed standing up here with just a slideshow, just a PowerPoint presentation. So next time, I give you my word that I won't be doing that. We are going to be taking notes of the things that are said because we want to capture everything that's said. Also at the end, there'll be an email address because we really want to get your feedback. So please feel free to contribute here, suggest us what we should be doing, and if there are other things that occur to you afterwards or the things you don't want to say here but you want to write to us and tell us, then the email address will be at the very end. Let's see if this works. Yesterday, the minister left us lunchtime. She had to go back to Cardiff for the launch of the Delivering a Digital Wales framework. And this is the diagram that they've come up with to explain that. We're the top part of the triangle, the inclusion bit, the digital inclusion bit, delivering an inclusive, sustainable, and prosperous society. Also, the integral parts are having a skilled and competent people, a thriving and competitive digital economy, the potential for transforming public services, all underpinned by a first-class digital infrastructure. So as the Minister said yesterday, that is the commitment of the Welsh Assembly Government in the coming period to drive forward all of those areas of activity. There's a high-level commitment ministerially. Ministers have been working on this and really driving this agenda forward for the last 12 months. But you can see that underpinning that, there's a whole range of program boards with government officials, external advisory boards with people from the private sector, suppliers working and suggesting how we should take forward with business, and also activities around infrastructure and skills. So I hope that indicates the seriousness with which the Assembly Government is taking the agenda forward and the extent to which there's cross-departmental collaboration. I've been in the Assembly Government for a while. I've never seen cross-departmental collaboration of a sort that's currently involved here. Now, there's colleagues here from a number of different Welsh Assembly Government departments, and they're nodding because it's a new experience for all of us. And it really is extremely positive experience for us. I came back into the Assembly Government off secondment about just over 2 years ago to set up Communities 2.0. And at that time, it was Communities 2.0, as Communities 1 before it, was seen as an island of activity. There was no policies in place, there was no strategic framework in place, and we were just doing this from a social justice perspective to get activity in the most deprived areas. Within a couple of months of arriving back in the Assembly Government, there was then the beginning of an avalanche of UK-wide and Wales-based undertakings. So you have the UK Government's Digital Inclusion Action Plan, the Welsh Affairs Select Committee of the House of Commons, the MPs, did a huge report on digital inclusion in Wales. The former government, the previous government, did Digital Britain, and the current government has come out this week, obviously, with its broadband plans, but also making Martha Lane Fox the digital champion, and she's produced her manifesto for a network nation. And as well as that, the British Irish Council, which is all the governments of England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, Guernsey, Jersey, and the Isle of Man, get together quite regularly, and as well as that, the Prime Minister, First Deputy Prime Minister, and the First Ministers, Deputy First Ministers of all the countries and jurisdictions will be getting together to discuss digital inclusion. And that's happening shortly. So there really is a sense of imperative around this agenda, a very, very high priority. This is just to give you some background. Now in Wales, BT in their workshop session yesterday were talking about the work that they'd been undertaking since 2002. And I remember when I first started work on this in around 2004, there were everybody online activities taking place in North Wales, in Newport, and in the Rhondda. And that was supported by BT. And that was one example, and there are others there, of good activity that was taking place in Wales. But they tended to be standalone activities, good, and delivering benefits for the local population, but not part of a strategic context, any sort of vision as to where we should be trying to get to, or with targets. And there's been other good work taking place as well. For example, Karen Roberts, who's here, has led the work around Ofcom's work around media literacy, and also Sangeet, who made such a contribution yesterday's work around the WISP, the Internet Safety Partnership. The framework that the Minister launched yesterday now provides us with that strategy, and the Delivering a Digital Wales, also launched yesterday, provides a very strong and wide policy context. So the Welsh Assembly Government supported on-the-ground activity from late 2005, Communities at 1, and then Communities 2.0. And they aimed at the most deprived wards in the most deprived communities in the convergence areas. But as I say, when these were set up, there was no policy or strategy within which they could fit. I remember in the Communities at 1, we did lots of good projects. Individual, I think we supported over 200 projects, and some of them are in this room. But the evaluators, and we got one of the evaluators here as well today, I remember saying to us, this is great work, but you're not getting critical mass. And I think the challenge for us now is how do we achieve critical mass? How can we build up the separate initiatives that we're undertaking? How can we make the linkages between different sectors? How can we join up organizations? How can we bring things together in such a way that can make an effective contribution? And I know that, for example, BT, Caerphilly Council, United Welsh Housing Association, Nova Scarman, Communities 2.0 have all met to discuss how they can do things on what I will call council estates in the Caerphilly borough area. Also, libraries, the libraries have made a contribution as well. So it's a matter of how do we knit these things together. So the framework is launched, and all I would say is that this is an incredibly fast-moving context. I mean, it is so fast-moving. I've never experienced anything like it. So whenever we are drawing up our proposals as to what we plan to do, and when we have our discussions this afternoon, we just need to be aware that this is a really quickly evolving environment. And so therefore our thoughts need to bear this in mind. The Minister yesterday said that we've got 785,000, 34% of our adults were not included, and she suggested a target that we could think of might be achieving 25% exclusion, which will be 75% digitally included by 2015, which is a European target. If we were to do that, that means getting more than 200,000 people online in the next 5 years. We've given some indicative figures here for older people who are not online and for people who live in social housing who are not online. With a fair wind, our research colleagues, our analytical services colleagues are going to be giving us new stats in December that could give us updates on those figures for social housing and older people. Also, you'll see there unemployed and economically inactive. And I know that Dawn from the DWP in London was scheduled to be here this afternoon. I think one of her colleagues might be here in her stead. So, as the Minister said, for the Welsh Assembly Government, getting people online is an increasingly important part of life. We want to improve people's lives. We want to avoid the risk of them being socially and economically excluded. But we recognise that we can't do this on our own. In fact, we are probably one of the minor players. All we can do is be a point of reference, if you like. It's actually the activities on the ground of the private sector, the third sector, and the public sector that can contribute to really achieving this. So, as the Minister said, we will provide strategic leadership, and I hope that this discussion today is one example of that, and we are quite happy to take on board the suggestions you have for us as to how we can go forward together. The Minister referred to our potentially developing a stakeholders groups. That's one of the things that we can talk about this afternoon. And also what we've been trying to do in the Assembly Government is to bring together different policies to avoid gaps in delivery. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but there are two things that are really significant that have happened in the last 2 weeks. Well, not 2 weeks. One in the last 2 weeks, one just a little longer ago than that. Within the last 2 weeks, there's been an independent review of social services in Wales that's come out. And they recognise the significance of digital inclusion and people getting online for the future delivery of social services in Wales, which is really quite significant that you have a major policy area recognising that, and that wasn't done at our behest. Also, you may notice there's a white paper out about universal benefits, and with the strong proposal in that benefits for working age people should be claimed online. Now that isn't legislation, but it just shows the way that thinking is going. I think an increasing assumption that public services will be delivered online. From our perspective, we come from the Department of Social Justice and Local Government, and therefore we want to ensure that people don't lose out and are not excluded socially or economically. But the backdrop against which we work changes very quickly. We put our framework consultation document out for discussion over the summer. We had brilliant feedback. We had 4 events that went really well, and we took on board as much as we could the comments into our new document, but I've got all 40 of the written contributions plus the outcomes of the 4 meetings with me. And really, we really appreciate that, because what you did, in some cases, you challenged our assumptions. We had a really strong dialogue with Chwarae Teg, age by age, going through, looking at the relationship between women online and men online. And I can see Jess smiling there from the WCVA, because she facilitated that conversation. But it really was good that our assumptions about our own analysis was challenged as we went through that. We've had good conversations. The document's been improved, I hope, around disabilities because of the feedback we had about the way that we should consider addressing issues of people with disabilities. And we had a nice conversation earlier over lunch with people from Disability Wales, and so we look forward to taking that dialogue forward as well. So we had offers of support to join in the stakeholder group, which is great. They came from the private, the public and the third sectors, and we would want to draw upon those offers of support and more. Some of the things that we've been doing since September, we've had bilateral meetings with some local authorities, Rhondda Cynon Taf, Blaenau Gwent and Merthyr, which have been really, really good. I think public service deliverers are becoming increasingly aware of this agenda and its relevance for them. I think the necessary cuts that they're having to make, I don't mean necessary cuts in the sense that they're needed, I mean the fact that they are being obliged to undertake cuts in public services, means that they're looking to see how they can keep services standards high, while if possible reducing cost, and this is obviously one way of doing it. Also, we've had liaison with housing associations and with care and repair. And I think, I remember I went about 4 or 5 years ago to meet some housing associations, the regen officers of the housing associations. And I went at that time because there wasn't that much of a consciousness out there about digital inclusion. And I went into the housing associations and they were doing much, much more than I'd even thought of that we should be doing. I mean, they were so far ahead of us. So we do recognize there's all sorts of good things already happening out there. But since over the summer we've had further conversations with that, and we do recognize there's a lot happening across all sectors. In the last week or so, we've had conversations with the WCVA to see how we can have an ongoing dialogue with them, to see how the WCVA hopefully can provide some strategic relationship, some strategic leadership for the third sector. And of course there's the backdrop of the BBC, who are going to be running a 2-year campaign to get people online. So someone said to me over lunch, that there really is a very strong following wind, if you like. And I think that's certainly the case. And as I say, the ministers are very much committed to the fact that we address issues of digital exclusion in Wales. So if you like, that was the backdrop for those who might not have been here yesterday, and to try to bring a sort of a coherent, semi-coherent series of points here. These are some of the issues that I've wondered about. So how do we go forward from here? How should we coordinate our activity? Who should be coordinating activity? What activity do we coordinate, and when do we coordinate it? What's the best way to involve the third sector in this, which has 10,000 organizations covering everything from health and social care to the environment? What's the best way to involve in the private sector? How best to go about involving the public sector? Do we look at them by sectors, or do we not look at them by sectors? Should we actually put the focus on those people who are excluded? Should we look at people with disabilities as a sector and say, okay, we'll drive that way? Do we look at people who live in social housing and drive that way? Or should we use already existing networks? Perhaps it's an and, or perhaps it's an and rather. We do one and the other. So do we dialogue with CVCs, the county voluntary councils, to see how they support us? Are new networks needed here? Or do we use, can we use, should we use currently existing networks? Older people's organisations, there are already loads. Should that be our routine? Is that what we do? Work with those in order that they mainstream this issue? So are new networks needed, or do existing ones suffice? Should we do it geographically? We've had extremely constructed dialogues by local authority area. RCT, we had a meeting a week last Friday, very, very positive. Is that the way? Do we go in through local authorities? There are national networks like libraries. We already have a strong relationship with the library sector, but therefore that's an example of how you can do things at the national level in order to reach down locally, as well as doing them at a county level. Likewise, say with the RNIB or with the WCVA. So I think those are the questions that at least I'm thinking of us talking about this afternoon. But I don't want you to necessarily answer these questions. If you have your own questions that you think that are the right ones to ask rather than these, please go in and say, I think we shouldn't be asking these questions. These are the questions we should be asking. Because when you are sitting in an office in Merthyr, you don't always know that you've got the right questions to answer. So, let's work through the questions as well as to provide the answers. Regard these as prompts, if you like. We've started sketching together, and I won't use a stronger verb than that, a delivery plan. That started, it's building on some of the things that we know are already happening, for example, the work of libraries. But I recognize there's a lot that's not in there that could be. In the new year, we'll need to beef this up quite a bit. And I'm hoping that the discussion we have now and the subsequent activities that come out can help improve that delivery plan and be included in that delivery plan. Because we recognize that it is going to be a living, evolving document. It isn't, if you like, a photo. It's going to need to be a video. It's going to need to change, and change quite quickly as things move on. And then finally, I guess, about a stakeholder group. Do we actually need a stakeholder group? What do you think about that? We certainly had some responses which said, yes, we like the idea of a stakeholder group, and please, can you involve us? I've had 2 people today come up to me and say, can we be involved in the stakeholder group, please? So, but can we visit that question? Do we use networks already existing? Do we think it's at national level, local level? Do we need a separate stakeholder group instead of, or as well as? My preference certainly is we should concentrate on activity rather than formality, if we have a stakeholder group or not. Then I don't think we need something that's rooted in formality. So I wrote down the words terms of reference question mark as a point of reference. I would hope that we are able to work something like the Digital Participation Network did that was organized by Ofcom in the summer, which was where 60 or 80 organizations came together that were able to talk things through and said, okay, we'll go off and do this, which is how the BBC 2-year campaign that's just started, First Click, came about. That was their contribution to it. Microsoft took stuff on, BT, others, post offices have all undertaken to do work on digital inclusion by people getting around the table and saying, okay, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this. And I think there was no formal terms of reference or things such as that. So I guess that would be, in a sense, looser alliances. So those are the sort of thoughts that I had to kick off what I hope will be a discussion. That's perhaps, I hope they were the last words I need to say. I'm happy to point to people and say, just so we can have a degree of order, and I think there should be some roving microphones here.
I've got one and Janet's got the other.
Okay, lovely. But other than that, I mean, are people happy with that as a basis for going forward? Yeah? Is that okay? Yeah?
Okay, my first question is do you...
Oh, can everybody say who they are and where they're from?
Oh, hello.
So we all know who we're talking to.
Hi, my name is Natasha James and I'm from Breaking Barriers Community Arts. First question is do you know who of those, who are the 750,000 people? Who are they? Who aren't digitally included?
No. Oh, yeah, I am McDonald, I don't need that. We have, in the first version of the document, we said that there's a real shortage of quality data. This agenda has come along really quickly. The Digital Inclusion Unit didn't exist 2 years ago. And therefore, the right questions haven't always been asked in the national surveys that collect data. The right questions are now being asked in the surveys, but it's going to take a little while to get the data. We are hoping to get the first data which tells us about the numbers of digitally excluded in social housing, and, for example, people with disability is more difficult because there are so many different sorts of disability. So I think we need to handle that one in a different way. But how many people in social housing, how many older people who are digitally excluded? Yes. The difficulty comes then when you get below an all Wales level, because we do not have a breakdown by county yet, so we don't even know where they are. What we've done is we worked with an organisation called Experian, and they've come up with models of where, based on socio-demographics, we think that people are most likely to be. And almost without exception, that confirms our own analysis based on the index of multiple deprivation. But as to, I could not say to you, there are X numbers of people who live in social housing who are digitally excluded in Merthyr. We can't yet do that. But we will be going there. That's the direction we're going in. Okay, it's over to you. I'll just point.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
David Ladd, Wales Cooperative Centre. Isn't it a bit soon to be talking about various people going online, excluded areas, etc.? It's almost like saying we'll buy a high-speed train to go from South to North Wales, but we haven't got the railway track because we haven't got the broadband or the wireless infrastructure to actually get people to go online, and that's going to frustrate most people.
I think that's not factually accurate. The vast majority of people in Wales have quality enough broadband to be able to go online. There are roughly 785,000 people, we estimate, who choose not to go online, either for attitudinal reasons or financial reasons. The numbers of people who can't go online because they're in not spots is tiny. I mean, we're talking a couple of thousand in comparatively few areas of Wales. The Welsh Assembly Government's put in place a scheme launched this summer that any community, and there are some, and Louise is here and able to speak better on this than I am because it's her policy area, but any community or hamlet or single house, single premises that does not have access to broadband can apply to Louise, not personally, but the Welsh Assembly Government, for I think it's £1,000, which is enough to provide a satellite communication link, and any community in Wales therefore can go online because the Welsh Assembly Government will provide the money to do so. And that can be agglomerated, I think, so that people can come together in groups. It's £1,000 per household, and they can come together in groups so that if there's 10 households in a community, then they can get £10,000 to get a connection. If there's 50 houses in a community, they can get £50,000 per connection. £50,000 maximum, Louise?
No. We've got some.
Okay, is there a mic for Louise to...
Yeah, we've got, currently we've got one application from a community in Rwlas in Gwynedd who got 128, I think it is, applications coming in. So that's potentially up to £128,000. There is no ceiling.
Yeah. So the point is that people excluded because they do not have a broadband connection has been a problem in the past. For a small number it still is, but there's a solution in place for them. And therefore, compared with the number of people who choose not to go online because of, because they're older in their attitudes or because they do not have the finances, it's a tiny problem. So the big problem is how to get people online, and this is a much bigger problem. If you look at the Heads of the Valleys, high quality connections in the Heads of the Valleys area, anybody could go online. The problem is only a third of the population do, roughly.
Peter Loughran, Age Concern Chiagar. In terms of taking the strategy forward, I mean, it seems to me that we now have a national delivery plan. And I would like to think that at a county level we could have a county delivery plan that matches and mirrors that sort of thing. So I think there is the opportunity there to engage the local authorities, the counties, but also working in close collaboration with the county voluntary councils. So I think going from national to county, and then within the county you can have a plan that engages with different voluntary sector groups, different sectors, youth, young people, children, older people, learning disabilities, mental illness, and so on. So I think the county structure is still quite useful for taking forward the national plan.
The gentleman by you first. Oh, is he? Okay, sorry. Right. Oh, do you want to introduce yourself? Sorry. Yeah.
Alan Thomas.
Yeah, you're on.
Digital champion for Rigs Online, the UK Digital Inclusion Initiative. Just a small comment. When you talk about disabilities, can you please not fix my wig or point towards me?
Okay. If I was, I apologise.
Thank you.
Okay.
Berwyn Evans from Menter Broaled, really to champion the rural areas. Because I didn't know, for example, that we have scattered dwellings. We can have broadband in our village if you're within half a mile, no problem. But then once you go outside that, you could take a week to go on a site. So the news about the satellite, but is that available for scattered rather than a group of houses? Individual. So when you talk also about digital exclusion, don't forget about our scattered rural communities. We're not big in numbers, but we have a contribution to make.
Yeah. And it's interesting that we have sort of rough figures, and so I'll give you this with goodwill, but in a sort of a rough figure because they're not sufficiently delineated. This is a sense of Ofcom, which is that the areas which have, rural areas have a higher take-up than urban areas or, say, the valleys. And that's, I suspect, because if you're in a rural area, then not just the benefit and the value, but the mere fact to get us access to a service, you'd have to drive 20 miles, means it is that much more important. And therefore, in areas where access historically has been more difficult, because you haven't had broadband, you still have higher take-up because of the need. Whereas in areas where, if you're in Merthyr, you can pop into the town centre on a bus, then, although there's good broadband provision, take-up's been much lower.
Nigel Hayton, Swansea Discover IT. UK Online is an organisation that works in England only at the moment. But is that a model that Welsh Assembly Government would like to look at and perhaps adopt in Wales and support the centres that do exist here and help them grow?
Yeah. The Welsh Assembly Government, if I can say, there's this thing called UK Online Centres, which is a number of thousands of centres, including the libraries, for example, in England. It's an England-only thing, in spite of being called UK Online Centres. And it's a shame, actually, because one of the members of staff was here earlier and she's left, or she'd be able to speak about this much more authoritatively than I can. In Wales, we adopted a different model about 5 years ago, which is we concentrated our resources on the most deprived areas, if you like, rather than give equality across the whole of Wales. Because I think UK Online Centres covers the whole of England equally and doesn't sort of focus in. So, we looked at the areas where there was most likelihood of concentrated parts of the population being excluded in order that the comparatively slender resources we are dedicated to those. And that's the approach we followed. And I think, that still is the position of the Welsh Assembly Government. I've not felt that was an inappropriate approach. The BBC campaign, which came along about in autumn of last year, for the first time, when we set up Communities 2.0 and Communities 1, it was unimaginable that the BBC would launch a 2-year campaign about how do you get people online. And so we're in the process of reflecting upon how best to respond to the need for a response that deals with that. Now, we've got a network of libraries. I can't remember how many libraries in Wales, 500 or even more? Pardon? Right, some hundreds of libraries which are networked. They're networked in all sorts of ways. They're networked because they all provide free access to IT. You know, anybody can go into a library and access them. They're also networked in the sense that there is a coordination amongst them, and so the library service has been able to respond to the BBC campaign. Communities 2.0 has been able to respond to the BBC campaign. But when we add together the sum of the parts, NIAS, Dysgu Cymru, Ofcom and various others, I think it's been a learning experience for us because it doesn't provide coverage across the whole of Wales. And as I say, none of us anticipated this campaign coming along, and therefore we weren't able to predict it. So I think one of the things that we're going to be doing now is to see how we are able to provide a more coherent response in the face of the fact that this campaign is going to be 2 years long. So there's certainly cause for us to reflect on what we have, because while it does one job, it doesn't necessarily do that new challenge that's been given to us. So that's one that I've been thinking a lot about over the last week or two, and will continue to think about. But certainly, you know, I'm happy that we can take on board, and Andrew and Ceres can note the fact that at least a suggestion has been made that how about having networks of centres across Wales? Yeah? Is that a good enough answer? I mean, does that deal with you? Yeah. I don't have the authority to say yes or no. It's only ministers who have the authority to say yes or no, but yeah.
Hello, Cam Nicholl, Shore Trust. This isn't a question, it's maybe more of a solution, hopefully not a naive solution. In terms of measuring the digitally excluded accurately, can we not in Wales tap into the census that's going on in 2011 and actually use that as a question? Because people are going to be knocking the doors, everybody's doors, to ask who's there, how many, etc. Could that not be something that we could tap into in order to provide you with accurate data?
Yeah. I'm not an authority on census. I know nothing about it at all. There may be people who do. I suspect if it's 2011, then the questions are already set, the forms are already printed, and it all will have happened by now, knowing the government. It'll all be there done. Because it's only a couple of months away, so it'll already have been done. There's a factory somewhere, I suspect, piled high with census forms. There are then a number of other options that we have. There's a thing called the Living in Wales survey, and that's the one. Now again, I'm not an authority on any of this, right? So I'm saying it with the best will, and others can correct or inform more. Living in Wales survey asks a large number of households in Wales a whole number of questions, and we have asked them to include questions on this area. A good one was done in 2007 by the Living in Wales survey on this area, which is the last really reliable data we have. There are other surveys then. There's the ONS, the Office for National Statistics survey. Ofcom do a survey. There's Oxford University's study as well, Oxis. The problem is they all ask slightly different questions, and they all use different methodologies. So one might do it face-to-face, one might do it over the phone, one might do it online. And the result, even if that's the same question, you get 3 different lots of answers because of the methodology you use. So what we hope to have is, from the next Living in Wales survey, really quite good data. And I mean, all I can assure you is that the Welsh Assembly Government Analytical Services Division is really, really supporting this whole venture. And the amount of work we've had out to them, you know, there's 3 guys who have been working, supporting us over the last 6 months who are fed up of our names, I think, because we're asking them to do more and more things. But we are getting, where we are now, compared to where we were 9 months ago, we now have really, really good data, but it's still really limited. But it's getting there each day. Can I say another reason that the delivery plan won't be available till the early new year is because we're waiting for data to come through. We're waiting for the outcome of this discussion here and for the data to come through from our analytical services.
Hi there, Richard Spear from Connecting Learners in the Third Sector project. I'll just follow up a point about UK online centres and then a separate point about the framework. The UK online centres, the misnomer I think really does kind of confuse people, and also it confused me, and the services actually that are offered through UK online centres, like the online basics courses, for example, are really great resource for helping people to take them first steps to get online. But I mean, I work predominantly in North and Mid Wales, and where a lot of people have first language Welsh, and those resources aren't available in Welsh, which is a problem. And I think I've searched around, you know, I've looked for resources doing similar things with a Welsh language option, and there doesn't seem to be anything out there if somebody can give me a pointer towards.
Can you have the microphone over, sorry?
Sorry, I said the Microsoft Digital Literacy course is available through the medium of Welsh.
And does that include things like the basic, this is a mouse, this is a keyboard? Oh, fantastic, thank you. Well, that's the solution to that side, but...
Can I say that's brilliant? That's exactly what I want. Don't all come through me, find the answers between yourself. Preferably sitting next to you.
Yeah, thank you, and I'll get it. I think you're already following me. The other point, though, about the framework, and this is coming from our perspective as a project, as a Wales Union Learning Fund project, is that it doesn't... It's not really about what's in there, it's about what's not. And the priority groups are clearly priorities. The economically inactive, the unemployed, but there's also a large group of people who are in employment, who are in low-grade employment, low-paid employment, who aren't included in this. And we, as Wales Union Learning Fund projects, we have a remit to deliver ICT courses, beginners ICT courses, and then moving people on to qualifications. Work-based learning isn't in here, as far as I can see. I scanned through it last night. And it's a really important aspect economically and in terms of public service reform, because the workplaces are changing. And I know, yeah, you've got skills and competencies of the people up there as part of the framework to deliver. But there's nothing explicit in here about workplace learning.
Yeah.
And it's a really important part of the Welsh Assembly Government's policy agenda as well, in terms of skills.
Yeah, no, it is. I completely take that point. And it's a question of where do we draw boundaries. Mm-hmm. In the same way as the document doesn't refer to, for example, building broadband pipes and wires, because that falls under infrastructure, the formal responsibility for work-based learning is with our colleagues in DSELs, in the education department. So that's part of their strategy of work. And if we did it, it would get confusing if you had two different Welsh Assembly Government departments trying to do the same thing.
No, but you're meant to be working across.
No, well, we are. We are working across. We are working across. But in the same way that, you know, I was able to speak a little bit about broadband, but I'm not responsible for it. It's colleagues in D&T across there, Louise, and she was the one who answered authoritatively. Unfortunately, there's not anyone here from the skills side. Yeah. If there was, they would be able to tell you exactly what it is that they do. And you probably know quite well what they're doing if you're working with them.
I mean, we do know what I do. I'm quite heavily involved in this. Not all Wolf projects are as heavily involved. But if we're talking about a strategic framework for the whole country, then people learning through work, and I think yesterday you said that you wouldn't have picked up IT skills if it wasn't for...
Yeah, the vast majority of people in this room, I suspect, actually.
Through your work, and workplaces are changing, and the economy's changing, public services are being delivered online, and there's people working in those public services who don't have these skills. There's people working in charities and community groups who don't have these skills. And therefore, it might seem like coming just outside of the remit, but I actually think it's central.
Can I answer in two ways? Firstly, I take the point completely. I mean, there is a point about where boundaries are drawn, right? And I will go back to our colleagues in, there's a guy called Simon Brindle, who's the head of the division, and Owen Evans is the head of the department. I'll go back to them and make this point to them. If I can point here to Simon, Simon's responsible for, one of the two people responsible for delivering a digital Wales. Do you want to put your hand up, Simon? Yeah. Simon Reno, sitting there. Right. And so he's hearing everything you're saying, okay? So it's his job to make sure that all those bits link. Yeah. He and I and a guy called David Warrender had a conversation, a meeting, 2-hour-long meeting about 3 days ago, where we were talking about the linkages of all those different things. And we talked through the linkages. We had a 20-minute discussion on decels and how the decels things links across to the agenda. It's just that when it comes to what's written down there, if I write it in, I'm pinching their work area in the same way as if they talk about working with older people, they'd be pinching mine. Simon, what?
Simon Reno. I'm the Programme Manager for delivering Digital Wales, which is that whole triangle. Remember, that is a different framework. You know, that is the whole government framework, of which we are looking at here at just the digital inclusion framework, one of those segments on that. But this point about joining all that up together, the thing that's missing on that diagram are all the little arrows that go between them. And that's got to be, you know, I said, I'm the Programme Manager. We're trying to deliver this in the idea that I'll work with all of my colleagues, the skills people, Owen Evans, Simon Brindle, the people who work in education there. There'll be people in delivering the public services. The Gwyn Thomas, who's the CIO for the Welsh Assembly Government, is taking a whole sector there. There's the Department for the Economy and Transport. We've got Louise and my colleagues here from, well, Nigel here is going to be sitting in the ICT strategy, so working with businesses. So we've got all of those pieces and we're starting to identify those. But delivering a Digital Wales got launched yesterday. You know, this is our opportunity to start bringing all these together. I'd hope that in a couple of months' time, I'll be going along to a conference that will be run by my my colleagues in education. I'm not sure they're there yet, but we've also got, you know, we could heard what's happening in the infrastructure, on the fact that the underpinning of the infrastructure, you know, that's why infrastructure is at the bottom of that triangle. We do understand that we've got to join this together. You know, I've been in this game since 2001, e-business policy, Cymru Line, e-Wales. We've tried these before. The big thing that was really evident yesterday was that it's cross-cabinet, cross-cutting. You've got all these ministers with their commitment now. So it's no longer one minister in just saying, this is important for the economy, we better get on with it. And then everybody just looks at it being an economic problem. You know, now it's really understood at ministerial level that everybody's got to do their part in their own departments.
Yeah, and in the meeting with Simon and David a few days ago, I advised them that when I had the meeting in RCT, which was superficially, at the first level it was about digital inclusion, half of the discussion was about public service delivery and the implications of what was happening for them as a public service deliverer. And I said to Simon and David, whenever you go to a meeting these days, one can't assume that you can just look at inclusion without having to address all the other items as well. And this is confirmation for Simon today. But also, you know, you've put your finger on how we do need to make sure those linkages work, but we really are working at it. Can I, while the mic comes back to you so you can have a second bite, can I just say that, and I take your point completely about there are some people, even in the public sector, who don't have the skills. There are 3 of us here from the digital inclusion team today. There's 4 of us all together. The 4th one, Stephen, he's our unofficial digital champion for the Social Justice Department and the Merthyr office. So he's going around and he's working with the messengers and the canteen staff. The security guards are all online. There was another sector as well, the cleaners, because they're the people who don't sit in front of computers every day. So he's our sort of digital champion for our building. And I hope that that can act as an example for other parts of the public sector as well.
Should sign him up as a union learning rep, and then
well, there we are. I'll ask my
have
colleagues
official
to pass
time
that
off
on.
for his duties to do that.
Yeah, he's on holidays today, but we'll pass that on when he gets back on Monday.
But I mean, I completely accept what you're saying. It's I'm still a little bit not confused, but I don't understand quite where the boundaries are between skills and digital inclusion, digital skills, digital inclusion, because the skills are how you include people. You can't include people without skills, and it's chicken and egg.
Rich, what we'll do, what I'll undertake, right, though I'll pass it to Simon if I may, is that we, based on your intervention today, we'll convene a meeting in the Welsh Assembly with our colleagues in skills. We'll work it through, and we'll come back to you and let you know what, in ways that actually nail it down for you, and then you can take part in that dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that okay?
And yeah, I mean, within the Unison Wolf projects, we are engaging in this. That's why I'm here, I guess. So as Wolf project managers within Unison, but wider as well, we do want to be part of this. So.
Brilliant. And we would really welcome your contribution. I think the unions have a particular role to play. Helen.
Can I just also add to your first point about bilingual resources?
Do you want to say who you are, Helen?
Sorry, Helen Williams from Cymal, Welsh Assembly Government. This is going to sound like a plug for the BBC, I'm afraid, but the BBC First Click resources are available bilingually, and they've also just launched a whole raft of new subsites on their BBC Learning. So if you wanted to take people from the first sort of basic ICT skills and then to actually learning a subject, there are bite-sized learning on different subjects there as well. And those have just been launched bilingually. There's about 13 new ones there that are also available in Welsh. Okay.
Can I, before we go to the next speaker, I've been passed a piece of paper which I guess people who are following the streaming of this, one from Ramblers Cymru. Alan, will you start a conversation with other WAG departments about how we can engage them in the digital inclusion debate? And so that's one I'll pass to Simon, if I might. And the answer is yes, we will. I don't know quite how the environmental agenda is included in this because I've not been part of that discussion. But Simon, can we, so that's Ramblers Cymru, if we can note that. And yes, thank you, we'll take that on board. The second one from the ARC project, does Alan feel that 200,000 new users are achievable at a local level, e.g. building Wi-Fi community hubs? I think it's going to need lots of different people working in lots of different ways in order to start biting into 200,000 people. If you look, and this is some of the data that's come from our colleagues in analytical services. If you look at other countries, you can see that there are profiles and there are plateaus. And the typical plateau in the UK over the last X years, 5 years, has been sort of about 70%. And the resources invested haven't managed to get it to go up beyond 70%. Other countries have different lower profiles, so they plateau at lower levels. So I think that's down to culture and demography. Norway's is about 80%. I think I said yesterday that with mobile phones, the market got it to 99% of the population without any external intervention. There appear to be plateaus which the market can't get beyond. And that's what we're trying to break through. It'll be interesting to see. And this is, I hope this partly answers the ARC project's question. If we're to get to that 75%, that means we're breaking through quite considerably the current plateau that exists in the UK. We're going to be going 5% above what the rest of the UK has been achieving. In Wales, we've been climbing quite steeply in the last few years, but we're only at 66%. What happens when we get to 70%? Are we going to then start plateauing off or not? What we don't know is the extent to which, if Unison start doing work like this, if the efforts, the contribution of the library service, a 2-year campaign from the BBC, the fact that Department of Work and Pensions are saying people have to claim benefits online, the fact that social services departments are saying we need to take this into account, we don't know what the outcome or the combined outcome of all of those factors are going to be. So does Alan feel that 200,000 new users are achievable at the local level? Answer, I don't know, but I know it will just be down to Welsh Assembly Government, it will be down to everybody in this room and people outside of this room. But there's a EG building Wi-Fi community hubs, which is a separate point. And I think one of the interesting things, and I know Terry's here, Terry Price from Nova Scarman, and he has been working in a number of areas with community hubs. And last week I met people from Llanilleth, which is the community's first project, and they're putting in community hubs around the Llanilleth area. So I think there's all sorts of interesting experiences beginning to come out of that. And I think community hubs will be one of the contributory factors to making it happen, but only one of many.
Chris Allman, Circuit Rider Communities 2 project. One observation I'd like to make is that I think there are three things that are needed. We obviously need the centres, the community hubs, the libraries, the places that people can go and try out internet access for themselves, get a feel for it, and get training. So that's obviously one thing that we're all agreed on. The other thing we need to make that effective is on-the-ground marketing. I noticed with the BBC First Click campaign, one of the problems with that was that the marketing was mainly centred around the libraries themselves. Apart from the BBC, obviously the BBC were pushing out a certain amount of information, but there was also a tendency to, a lot of the people that were recruited onto courses that I took in our local library were people who had seen the posters in the local library. So we may automatically be excluding a large section of the population who perhaps aren't in the habit of using the local library service, and those people may actually be the very people we're trying to most reach. So on-the-ground marketing, even if it's down to flyers in the local grocer, and working with local community groups and so on and so forth, is also very important. The third thing I'd say that is important is enablement, because if you take the libraries, I mean the libraries are a cracking example of really very good resources which are there for people to use. But they're only generally open 9 to 5. So if you're working, they're not very accessible. They don't have creche facilities, so if you have young children, they're not very accessible. So whatever solution we put in place, we're going to have to think imaginatively and holistically about what resources we need to enable people to use those resources. Because it's not just about putting the resources there, it's about making sure people know that they're there and that they can get to them and they can use them. That's it.
Yeah. On the last point, as I said, I think at the beginning to that question, I think one of the things, when we set up Communities at One about over 5 years ago now, John Bennett, who's not here, I remember took Owen Evans, who was then with BT, and me around the valleys. And we sort of drove up from Caerphilly, we went up to Fochrew and all sorts of places, and my colleague Chris Gittins, we went across to Porth. And what became evident was that almost every community had a community facility with kit there. We went to Porth, and there was a room that was probably not much off the size of this. There was about 200 machines there, and there was not a single person sitting in front of them. You go to council estates in the Caerphilly Basin, every single one had a room dedicated. So the question isn't about getting kit in the community. I suspect the only place that didn't have it at that time in the Caerphilly County area was Fochrew, and that was because the community centre didn't have a secure room. Now, a secure room has been built in that community centre, and so they have a suite. They have an IT suite in Fochrew. So I think the question isn't one of kit in the community. It's a question of making the connections and opening the doors and getting the support. And getting the support, there's a whole issue, and I had a very interesting conversation with the WCVA 2 days ago. I think it was 2 days ago. I feel I'm in a bit of a time warp at the minute. About volunteers. What contribution can volunteers make? Because within families, younger people naturally say, oh, come on, Gran, I'll show you how to do this. And so one of the conversations we've been having with the WCVA and with Communities 2.0 is there any way that we can help take forward this volunteering agenda specifically around this issue, particularly if you're going to have UK-wide broadcast advertising of campaigns. I mean, what sector of British life wouldn't like to have the BBC spending 2 years every couple of months saying, please do this, why do you do that? Here's a phone number to ring, get in touch. Now, Andrew might be able to comment on, because he was at the meeting earlier this week, which sort of reflected on that first stage of that first click campaign. But certainly I think there's a lot for us to learn. But I take the point therefore, and it was the point that you made, how can we perhaps bring together centres that already exist, but stand alone? In a way, it's a sort of a scaling up of the sorts of things that have happened small. How can we bring some sort of, bring them together in ways that they have the resources to do? Now, this is very early thinking, right? And you've got more ideas than I've got. You know, Terry's got much more experience at working in community centres, setting up Wi-Fi hubs than I've got. So the experience is in this room and outside of this room, and therefore that's why we need the support back to you. And you know, so I take the point about the libraries and their limitations, but they are, 1, available, and 2, free. And if you ever go to a library to try to get access to the IT, I mean, the problem is that they're so well used. I mean, they're massively, massively used. But I suspect there's even more facilities outside which are community-based, which aren't linked in the way that libraries are. They're not sort of in a family tree. So perhaps we can see if we can bring some sort of family tree to them, whereby we have greater coherence, and we can see how we can move along when the next time there's a campaign. But I wouldn't mind Andrew commenting a little bit about, if he may, my colleague Andrew Jacobs from the Digital Inclusion Unit.
I don't know whether I need a mic.
Maybe you're going to let a guy. I think Richard will have something to say. If you're not loud enough, they can be one line.
Yeah, as Alan said, we had a kind of mop-up session of the first push of the first click campaign earlier this week with some of the key stakeholders present. A few people in this room actually were at that meeting. Karen Roberts of Ofcom. Libraries are usually represented, although they couldn't be there this week. Nice Dysgu Cymru, Careers Wales,
BBC.
The BBC obviously. And I think we're really hopeful that we'll be in a much better position come the next major drive ahead of Adult Learners Week in May. It was pretty close to the wire actually. The BBC struggled to get some of the marketing materials out in time for the October push, and some of the we had less trails in Wales compared to England because of the Snowdonia programme. Although you know we still had a fair number of calls coming through around about the 1,000 mark. So I mean it was a partial success, but as I say we're much more hopeful for the next major push going forward.
I just looked at the time. The time's marching on. There's a person here as well. After you, yeah, a person here. Yeah. What I'd like to do after these 2 contributions, if it's okay, is ask people to concentrate now on how they would like us, how we all go forward together on it.
Alphabet from Nova Scaman Group. I'm part of the people who are delivering this first click in libraries. Yeah? My personal experience from delivering this training is the first burst that the people will get. Yeah? If you've been into a library and the connection is poor, they'll have a very bad experience, and that will put them off. So my suggestion was if the BBC can have this thing offline on a CD, so if the library is not there, they will have it at home and they will try practice on it. I think that will be brilliant.
Okay, good idea, and we'll take that up, and Andrew can take that forward in that context. Back to you. You do.
There's been a lot of discussion about some of the challenges involved, and there are obviously some challenges. But one of the things that occurs to me is about giving people a reason to go online, something exciting, fun, interesting, in the same way that I think probably when televisions first came out, you know, loads of people kind of went, oh no, I quite like my radio, I'm not going to get a television. And you know, every household has a TV. You know, it's that type of thing actually giving, you know, some people a damn good reason to get online.
Yeah, I agree. But I think it's each person to their own. I think there's no one thing. I think there's loads. Karen Roberts, at the back. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one.
Steve Fossey, Communities 2.0. I just have it's been really great hearing about the grants for the not spots and the work that the Assembly is doing to make sure the infrastructure is there. An observation I'd like to make is that while internet service providers refuse to do business with some of our clients, none of that's going to matter. If the financially inactive can't get contracts for landlines to get broadband services at home, then they'll never be able to participate.
Yeah, and I mean, there's this, Andrew's desk faces literally like that to the head of financial inclusion in the Department of Social Justice. So, you know, we're really conscious of the relationships between digital exclusion and financial exclusion. We are committed to working, and we've spoken to service providers to see if we can, you know, when I was a kid, I remember in our house we had, when we first had a telephone, we had a shared line, and it was cheaper, and now we've forgotten about shared lines for telephones. But why can't there be some form of collectively sharing access, and that can happen in a number of ways, to broadband, which means you can bring down the overall cost per person. Those conversations are taking place. I know that, you know, there's people here who've been having those conversations, including with BT. I think this agenda is a marathon, not a, you know, we need to keep all these targets in mind and just aim at them and just keep working at them. They're not all going to come quickly or together or at once, but we just have to keep working and breaking them down. But we're aware of it. I mean, yeah. And if, I hope Karen is, but if in future we can start thinking now of how do you think we should take the next stage forward? So I think we haven't got that much time now. We're talking, it's been very constructive, but we need to move on a bit.
Right, I'll try not to keep you too long. Just to, I think I've been mentioned too many times now not to have to say something. Just on the First Click campaign, I'd just like to say that I think Wales responded particularly well given the circumstances, because the BBC's campaign was based around a model, as you say, for UK online centres that already existed, and we didn't have the same infrastructure in place. So I think we adapted quite well to that. And as Andrew said, it was the first wave of the campaign. So, and you know, it was very much a sort of suck it and see approach. And we've definitely, you know, got some valuable lessons that we've learned from the first wave that we will take on board. So this is a plea basically to anybody who wants to be involved in the next wave or going forward, who think they should be involved or have got capacity or provision there, to certainly get in touch with me later, and I'll feed that back to the BBC, because part of the process is to feed back to them, you know, for other organisations that weren't involved this time that would like to be, to sort of get them on board for the next round. The second thing I'd like to say is that Ofcom's worked closely with Welsh Assembly Government now over a couple of years on the whole digital inclusion agenda, and it's fantastic that the Delivering a Digital Wales was launched yesterday. But I think, and this is speaking personally, I think that almost needs to be replicated, as the gentleman from Age Concern said, at a local authority level, because probably the one thing that everybody's got in common is the public service delivery element, or the sort of commonality of that, and most people go to their local authority for that. So it would be fantastic, I think, if that triangle there that has now disappeared off the screen could almost be replicated at a local authority level, so that you get each of the departments within the local authorities to have the same level of commitment across the board, across each of the departments that have got an element of, you know, sort of digital inclusion to form part. I don't know if that's doable, workable, or...
There are a number of different strands under Delivering a Digital Wales. So, you know, on the digital inclusion side, there's a digital inclusion board and work on underneath. On the public service delivery side, there's a thing called the Efficiency and Innovation Board, and that has a strand around ICT. And I went to that about 2 or 3 months ago and spoke to them, and there was it was a half an hour long discussion, and certainly many local authorities, if they're representative, those people in the room, if they're representative, really are aware of the benefits for them as service deliverers to having as many services as possible online. I think it's fair to say that England, you know, has been doing this for a little while, and in fact, Ewan and Paul are over there, and they may want to contribute on this agenda. You know, there's a lot of experience that's gone on in England, which is why we invited Paul and Ewan to this workshop, who've been essentially working with local authorities in England, and that there are perhaps even things on the shelf that we can just pick off and implement. But certainly our local authorities and our public services generally are now, you know, really aware of it as an agenda item. And I look to Simon, because I would hope that Simon now in the Delivering a Digital Wales role, and our colleague Nick Beattie, who really has been involved in this agenda at the European level, and at the delivering digital Wales level, and that's from the beginning of January, I think may well be working on public service delivery, will be really aware of this. Following the Rhondda Cynon Taff meeting we had 2 weeks ago, what we agreed is in future, digital inclusion doesn't go out on its own to meet the local authority. Digital inclusion and public service delivery colleagues together go out to meet the local authority, so we're tackling both at once. And from that perspective, we can suggest to them that they devise their own county-based strategies. I think that's a really good, and call me naive or stupid or what, but I hadn't thought of having county-wide strategies, so if we can do that, I think that would be a real step forward.
Just one more observation, then I'll shut up, but it actually probably leads into where you want to go next. In terms of stakeholder engagement, I mean, just speaking from a personal perspective, I think it's probably fair to say that one size definitely doesn't fit all, and that from what I do, I don't think you'll get any problems at all having a high-level buy-in. It's just how you sort of marry up the grassroots level and the overarching strategic approach, and making sure that each is aware of the other, because I know there are hundreds of networks out there in different sort of stakeholder groups that all filter stuff out amongst themselves, but I don't know how much coordination there is between those different, cross-sector, plus also, the geographic differences, and I don't know how you go about doing it, but I know the networks are there. It's just kind of coordinating them all. Does that make sense?
From an Ofcom perspective, you've done a brilliant job over the last couple of years, actually pulling lots of us together, Karen.
Thank you, Alun. But I just think that going forward, that there's lots of it going on out there. And the one thing I will say, and you know this yourself, and unfortunately the Ofcom's Digital Participation Consortium has been pulled, but the one common sense approach they did seem to have was the kind of ethos that there would be a subliminal message along the sort of lines of the 5 fruit and veg a day, that you instill that kind of need for digital literacy and digital inclusion at a sort of a less kind of formal approach to it, that you kind of instill it in its sort of every message that you send across, and that people kind of generally accept it as the norm, and then you use that sort of approach to kind of, I don't know, get all sectors and all partners to buy into it and to sort of tap into that overarching message so it doesn't become too formal, or you should learn this, or you should, because that's particularly off-putting to most people.
Just by you.
Leah Fee, Swansea iTech. One of the things that's come up repeatedly in the workshops today is that mobile phone penetration is so much higher than broadband penetration. It'd be interesting to know, A, if any research has been done on why that is. I suspect the answer, as to what you said earlier, it's no. And also, at a guess, I think it might have a lot to do with pay-as-you-go versus contracts. A lot of... is that better?
No, when you finish, I'm going to hand the microphone over to Louise.
A lot of learners, certainly anecdotally, I know a lot of my learners who have not got landlines, not got computers at home, have got mobile phones, and they're all pay-as-you-go ones.
Thanks. I'll hand you over to my colleague Louise now, who will know about these things and I don't.
Sorry, I don't have an answer for you. We haven't done any research on mobile take-up or the reasons behind why that is the case, unfortunately.
Someone has a microphone there.
Almost preempted my question, but we talked about stakeholder engagement here. A lot of our talking about digital inclusion seems to have revolved around the PC and fixed line broadband. Yet we've just said that we've got 99% mobile phone market penetration. It's quite feasible within the lifetime of the framework that most mobile phones will be smartphones. Their contracts will be affordable to financially excluded people who tend to use pay-as-you-go contracts. But if we don't design all these services that we're going to be putting online, all these public services, if we don't design them to be mobile accessible, then we might ironically quite easily get an extra 200,000 people online, but they'll still be excluded due to lack of forward thinking throughout the framework.
I don't know if you want to respond. I agree. Simon we'll be passing notes of all this to Simon, and it's one for him to discuss with the public service delivery colleagues. Yeah?
Alun, just to, can you hear me?
Who are you? Sorry. It's working, Ted. Yeah.
Okay, Terry Price and Nova Scarman. Just on Steve's point, and some of the other queries are going around about sort of affordability and broadband and so on. We have been in fairly active talks with BT in London, with the wholesale department, about looking at different delivery models for broadband, which could be things like shared lines, it could be one pipe into a block of flats, it could be pay-as-you-go, it could be wireless solutions. And we're hopeful we might get some pilots off the ground on a UK level to actually look at different, means of actually delivering and those sort of packages. If UK government wants to come up with some money for pilots, then it'll happen a lot sooner. If they don't, then it'll take a lot more negotiation. But we are trying to look at different ways of playing around with models, possibly social enterprises and so on, as ways of actually delivering those.
I think Jess wants to say, I think...
Yeah, the broadband support scheme would be able to help with that, Terry. If you wanted to apply to that, you'd be able to.
If I may add something as well. Before I took up the job of the Digital Wales programme, I was the basic broadband, the RIBS broadband manager, getting broadband all over Wales. Worked with a lot of communities where they, as community solutions, went to whatever service providers. It did require somebody in the community to take the lead, but they ended up almost giving broadband for a year for like £10, £20 connections for an annual charge, because what they were taking was a basic 2 megabit broadband connection into one person's house and then wirelessly distributing that round a distributed rural community over the reach that stuff you can buy. Now, those solutions can come forward now under the broadband support scheme as community solutions, and that sort of very cheap subscription, if not down to, depend on how altruistic one person wants to be, down to free into those communities. And I think we will start seeing that.
Hi, it's Mark from RCT Homes. So again, I'll get back to going forward in a minute, but it is really unaffordable, broadband in where we're doing a pilot at the moment for WiMAX, which is near Pontypridd, and they just can't afford. I mean, you've got to get connected, there's usually a package, etc., etc. Won't go into that, but that is a problem. So, but keep an eye on the WiMAX project, because that, for wireless, it's much easier to, I don't understand the physics of it yet because I haven't really looked at it, but Wi-Fi I think is a problem for broadband. It's a different signal than a telephone. WiMAX is the next generation of wireless. But we're already starting a pilot, so keep an eye on that. So with RCT Homes.
One thing that occurs to me, as you hand the microphone over, one thing that occurs to me, whatever the conclusions we reach about sort of formal organisation or informal organisation, one thing that seems good is if somehow we could have a network of information. If we could somehow have, if you like, a virtual information system so that people are able to communicate with each other about what's going on in RCT, about WiMAX, about Terry's work around Wi-Fi in communities, and about some of the questions that are coming out. So that's one thing that strikes me on the basis of this conversation that we could have, which could be constructive.
That was actually going to be my question, really. So
go on.
I was just thinking, Jessica McQuaid from the WCBA, and I was just wondering, in WAG as your role maybe in kind of coordinating this, are you going to plan on having all the connections that you've made so far with different third sector organisations and the work that Communities 2.0 is doing? Are you planning on kind of making that available to kind of everyone else so we can start to build the critical mass? Is there going to be a web tool, a portal, an interactive map, with case studies? Because that would be so useful for kind of at a local and a national level to take this agenda forward. Yeah.
You asked a few different questions there, I think, and if I miss any, please come back to me. I think the work that Communities at One did, which was 2005 to 2009, there were 200 and odd projects there. I think it's the case, and Mark Catherine or Claudia or someone can confirm it, we did 200 and odd project descriptions, and they're available, and I think they're online.
We can easily put everything, all of this, onto digitalinclusionwales.org.uk.
Are you mic'd?
Or not, I've just got a loud voice.
Loud enough to be picked up.
Oh, loud enough. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do a roundup at the end here and give you that website address again, but we've got so much information coming in online now. The tweets are coming in. All of what you've been hearing in the last couple of days is being live streamed and will be up there from Monday onwards for a very long time. It's an obvious place to put all this information, and we'll just make sure that whatever you're asking for gets put up there. Easy, done. And there's a forum facility on there. And it's free.
And also there were 12, if I remember correctly, there were a dozen in-depth case studies done of the work. They are there, they've been made available. There were 40, I think, responses came in to the consultation document with all the sorts of suggestions, including, Jessica, the suggestions that the WCVA made, which were really constructive and positive. I mean, and I'd commend everybody to read the WCVA's contribution. Pardon? No, because I think you really point out really good things about what we should be doing. And all of those are now available online and have been since yesterday, I think, Andrew?
The summaries at the moment.
Oh, only the summaries are up at the moment.
The responses aren't there.
But you'll have access to the full response. The 6 ask for anonymity, but you'll have access to the other 34.
I've got a question that's come in online. Do you want to go back to Richard?
I'll take the question.
Can you read that?
Oh, hold on a sec, I don't know that. Has the Assembly determined precisely how much money will be put into DI and how the budget will be allocated? And that's from Abby Hansen. Currently, the Welsh Assembly Government has, with WEFO support, because this is WEFO funded under convergence, a sum which runs from 2009 to 2015. That's roughly the full sum, but that includes VAT and all sorts of stuff, so it actually comes out to much less. It comes to about £19.9 million over 6 years, and so that's roughly about £3 million a year, roughly. Now that, though, is confined to convergence areas. And for those people who were here yesterday, which is roughly West Wales and North West Wales and the valleys, so it excludes Cardiff, Newport, Monmouthshire, Powys and North East Wales. For those who were here yesterday, they'll have heard us say that we are seeking to find out if we can release money to make available finance for North East Wales and for Powys. Also, third sector organisations are making an application for South East Wales to see if funding can be available for South East Wales. It's not the case, particularly in these straitened times, that the Welsh Assembly Government has a lovely big pot of money that I wish we did have, that I could draw down on. But it is the case that the Welsh Assembly Government is committed to trying to see how we can get funding available for all different parts of the country, although they might come from different sources in different ways, and sadly probably with slightly different rules of access. But we're seeking to get finance available for all parts. I hope that's okay, Abby. Okay.
Matthew Lloyd, Regional Community Broker, Communities 2.0. I've been gathering up my points, really, and Steph's. But basically, one of the things we were thinking about is when we delivered the first click stuff in Rhondda Cynon Taf and Caerphilly libraries, it was interesting to see the different restrictions between the two counties. And it was much more open in Rhondda Cynon Taf, as in people could go in and use Facebook and access their own email, but in other counties it was quite restricted, and it was quite interesting how different they were. So I think, in terms of somebody that perhaps hasn't got access, to computers and do go and use libraries, there's an inconsistency that seems to be apparent, and Steph mentioned the same across Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen as well, which can be frustrating, for people that are actually trying to access computers at libraries. One of the other things that we thought as well was, one of the other things we picked up as well is obviously a lot of people are using Facebook, and that's what people seem to be using, but there are a lot of restrictions in terms of councils and across the board really in terms of public sector that are preventing people like Communities First teams actually using Facebook to engage with communities. So that was something that we finding quite frustrating to overcome quite a bit of the time in terms of breaking down those barriers to make sure that they are open for people to communicate. And the third one was, well, I go on about mapping all the time, as you probably know, but in terms of UK online centres, I think what it does do is obviously just bring consistency of marketing across the board, especially for hard to reach people, or not necessarily hard to reach, but you know, for people that don't have access to provision, you know, it does bring that consistency across the board, really.
Yeah. If I can take the last one first. Mapping of centres already has happened to a reasonable degree in the areas covered by Communities 2.0. We recognise that mapping hasn't taken place in the same way outside of Communities 2.0 areas. I've been in conversations that Andrew's not even aware of yet, I think, a couple of days ago, about how we can get mapping across the whole of Wales, of which, and Catherine doesn't know this, I meant to talk to her about this, but I haven't had a chance yet, drawing on Communities 2.0 information as the basis from which we build. So that's one thing. Secondly, I suspect that Helen and I have talked about inconsistencies. In the first digital inclusion consultation event in North Wales, there were 2 local authorities in that event, and they sat next to each other. And which was the first time I heard of this, because they were from the local authorities themselves, and they were talking about the fact that those 2 local authorities had different policies on it. And one local authority said, you know, our local authority encourages people to dialogue with that local authority on Facebook. But that same local authority's library service didn't allow people to use Facebook. So they were aware of that, and they flagged it up. And we took that back to the Welsh Assembly Government, because that seems to be the sort of thing where it's possible there's a meeting of all the IT managers in local authorities. But this isn't an IT manager's policy area. They will say, you know, I was with the Housing Association IT managers about a month ago, 3 weeks ago. And we discussed this area because it's not just local authorities. Housing associations the same, have different policies in relation to use of Facebook. And the IT manager said that, look, on the one extreme you have absolute security, and on the other extreme, you know, you have absolute openness. And it's where do you draw it along the line? And they said, we are IT managers, we will implement whatever the policy of the housing association is. So that's one for us to take up in the fora of housing associations. But when it comes to local authorities, we fed that back through a guy called Gwyn Thomas, who is the Chief Information Officer, and so for them to take up through the public services delivery side. So whenever these things are raised, you know, there have been issues raised here, we will feed them back through. So again, we'll flag up the fact that this one's, excuse me, Matt, this one's been raised with us. But on those 2, we've already done it about 2 months ago.
Thank you. Tamina Goskar, Swansea University. I just wanted to make a suggestion for your forward plan, and that is to think about content provision perhaps a bit more explicitly, because a few people have mentioned today the BBC campaigns in terms of providing bite-sized learning, etc. But I think here there is an opportunity to recruit organisations and groups who actually are content providers. For example, universities, further education colleges, they already teach courses that could easily be adapted to distance learning, for example. And I think the sort of the content provision side is an important glue, as you mentioned earlier, to entice some people online and get involved than, you know, might otherwise be the case. So that was just a suggestion I wanted to make.
And I hope that we'd be able to call on your support in order to help us achieve that. There is some, Open University is very positive and will wish to help us. Little bits of Swansea University, little bits of Newport, Glamorgan is there, but I think it would be great if we could bring greater coherence to the higher education sector. We've not worked with the further education sector. Perhaps we can have a meeting outside of this forum, and we can have a sort of a strand with FE and HE, subject to consultation with our colleagues in skills and our colleagues in delivering in Digital Wales.
Hi, just to come back to the point you made about the inconsistencies, perhaps one way to address that is the suggestion that was made about your overall diagram in DDW, in the DDW document, the triangles, local authority level matching that, and if that is matched to the overall document, then maybe we can work through all those little inconsistencies that are frustrating for people. And I do suspect that there's a certain level of snobbery with regard to things like Facebook and Twitter and blogs, whereas a discussion forum, if it's regarded as being academic or scholastic, is okay, then things like Twitter and Facebook are not. And perhaps there's a message that needs to be put out there as well about that.
The mic is, Michelle, sorry.
I have a question. My name is Michelle Walker, Regional Broker in the Communities 2.0 team. It's relation to how to take things forward in the framework. I think there's some really good localised examples of partnership working where we have private sector, public sector and the third sector working together to ensure delivery of digital inclusion activity on the ground. Can we not kind of use those models and grow them to more regional, even national ways of actually seeing how we take a strategy like the framework and make it actually deliver on the ground? And part of that is what the people from, our colleagues from the City of London Delivery Innovation team mentioned some really good examples today about digital inclusion activity and involving people engaging within the public sector and frontline services. And I think that we should take some of those smaller scale examples and say, well, can we mirror those into operating a more national delivery of the framework within Wales?
Would you like to just give the examples of a couple?
They are over here.
Yeah, no, but you said, but you said there are a couple of examples of Wales of small.
In Wales. Well, I think we're having projects that we operate that develop collaborations that look at involving both the public sector and the third sector. Where maybe we're falling short is trying to involve more of the private sector and its delivery on the ground. Because I think to make this framework work, we do need quite a lot of investment, and that won't always just come from the funding within the Welsh Assembly or Europe. It has to come also from the private sector.
Yeah. Okay. Well, perhaps the mic can go across to Paul and Ewan while this gentleman up here asks a question or makes a point.
Yeah, Detective Constable John Cherry from South Wales Police. I'm currently working with the Crime Wales initiative. Picking up your point on social networking and the use within the public sector, it's been a massive issue for the police service, and I think in the first instance people need to understand the actual risks from the use of social network sites, primarily from the risk of virus and malware infection within public sector infrastructure, right? We can't ignore that. However, there's a case of risk management here, rather than being risk averse to the use within an environment. And the reason I'm coming in, it may be worth you speaking to Nick Keane from the National Policing Improvement Agency, who's driving forward Policing 2. And a big focus of that is including social networking within the police service. I don't know how many of you remember the case of Greater Manchester Police, a day in the life of policing in Manchester. Absolute massive success. Few problems, but they've learned from that. So, you know, these are the sort of things we've got to manage, and we understand what the risks are. We've got to be responsible, but however, the benefits in using them. And I think it'd be worth you speaking to Nick on the good work that he's doing nationally, not just in England on that.
Yeah. I had a meeting about 6 months ago with the police service, the four police services in Wales. And they have a representative in the Welsh Assembly government, and he came to see me and he said, well, I'm not quite sure why I'm here, but I'm just told to come and see you. And we worked together and we concluded that if the police service wants to communicate with young people these days, then you have to use social networking as a primary means of... And then somebody afterwards said, well, do you mean text them to say you're nicked? Anyway, that's I don't know if you and Paul, do you want to say something on that issue of earlier?
Okay, thank you. Yes, for those who didn't manage to get to our session, we talked about projects we've done in local authorities across England, where we're using ICT as a catalyst for change in frontline services to very disadvantaged groups, like looked after children, prolific offenders, mental health sufferers, problem families, young unemployed people. And the characteristic of all of those groups is they draw heavily on public services and are very expensive to public services. So our proposition hasn't been about getting those people online. It's been about changing the way that public services support them by using technology, which does have a knock-on and a roll-on effect into their confidence and ability to use technology. But from the public service point of view, the business case is very clear because it is taking cost out of public services and achieving efficiency in a very niche area. Whereas the business case, the public sector investment case purely for getting people online is very seldom clear or robust to the local authorities in our experience. So generalising, we found that localism is very important because it is at the local level where you can get much more specific about what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, that the public sector investment case stacks up very robustly. The more you get away to generalising it and going up to the national level, the harder that becomes. And also, at the local level, around a specific problem, again, you can form the alliances with the voluntary sectors, the charities involved in, for example, Looked After Children, was one of the cases we described. And you can get private sector people involved because you are focusing on a particular problem area. And people will congregate around that, and the sort of charities who are involved in that will get involved. And there's a purpose to it, which can be missed if you try and make the thing too more general. So localism, focus, narrowing it down, getting a robust business case were the things we were emphasising in our presentations.
Thanks, Paul. My message to Simon will be, Paul and you and a Cabinet Office staff on secondment. Their secondment ends, I think, in March next year. So we need to take advantage of their experience. I've already gone to Nick Beattie about this. Yeah, but I think as well as Nick, if from a delivering Digital Wales hub, we can drive it through so we can make the most of them before, so their experience isn't lost. We've got 15 minutes. Right, concrete proposals about the future and nothing else. So we have 15 minutes focus on it.
Concrete proposal in terms of leading on from what's been discussed before. There's loads of ideas in the room. There's loads of people with loads of experience. I guess a stakeholder group can't include 100, 200, 300, 400 people, but something like the website, the digital inclusion website, possibly there would be a function on that. I've not explored it, so you can tell me if this already exists, where we can describe who we are, the organisations involved, say what we're doing, what we'd like to see changing, any resources and stuff that we use, and same the areas that we're working in, so that we're not duplicating, that we're sharing best practice, and that people like the Welsh Assembly Government can go into that have a presence there and see what's going on, because I think there's a case where loads of people are doing loads of really good stuff, but even at an event like this, you can't talk to everyone. You can't find out exactly what's relevant to you, and you've only got a short time over coffee, that kind of thing. It would be good if we could all contribute to something like that, because we're all digitally included people, we can all get online. So, I don't know, in terms of going forward, maybe that could be something behind or in front of a stakeholder group. So, and Catherine, can I ask you, at least in the first instance, if you'll facilitate that based on the site? And we certainly will, yeah. And then we can talk how to take it forward from there. Okay, that's great.
Hi there. I think that your programme should be a catalyst for projects, entrepreneurialism, so that people can then set up their own projects and feed back into that programme.
Could I suggest that each local authority is asked to come up with a county strategy? I'm thinking some years ago, and it probably applies in lots of different contexts, each county was asked to come up with a 50-plus strategy, and eventually counties had some funding and coordinators and so on and so on. So I think if each local authority was challenged to actually come up with a strategy based on the national framework which we now have, and then of course at a local level, whether the lead body is the county council or the voluntary sector or whatever, then that organisation can draw in the other sectors and then drill down at some stage to more sectoral aspects, whether that's, say, in relation to the third sector, learning disabilities, mental illness, youth and community, or whatever. So you can have that broader stakeholder involvement at a county level. But you know, since we have a good county structure, it seems to me, and a lot of organisations look to the county arrangements, and there are lots of county forums and networks. So I think that's not a bad place to start. So I think if WAG was to challenge each county to come up with a county strategy, you know, that does have that engagement, stakeholder involvement, and so on.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Alan. Mark Smith from Communities 2.0, based at the Wales Cooperative Centre. It was just to pick up on the point of the gentleman here. Unison, sorry, pardon my ignorance, is that right? Well, yeah. I was aware that for a time there was, in terms of online sharing of best practice within the digital inclusion sector movement, if you like, there was a sort of open social network set up through Ning by people linked to, I think, UK Online Centres and other such bodies, digitalengagement.net. But it seemed to be quite a dormant forum for a lot of the time. And from my perspective as a marketing officer, I was really keen to see what was going on around the UK in terms of other examples of best practice of community engagement, how you market digital inclusion, what's the best language to use, what are the best vehicles to use, and so on. And I think if from this discussion today, if we do have some form of physical networks constructed, whether they be from existing forums or new ones set up, it would be obviously quite useful if we could have some kind of virtual forum to run parallel, perhaps on a thematic basis, so all of these discussions and ideas are not lost.
Can I go now?
Yes.
All right. Again, it's Berwyn from North Wales, and I feel I'm representing the rural areas again. I'm putting together an IT unit for our village. I've done 2 bits to the private sector, I thought. I got to know just before I came down here that one was not successful because they were looking for needs-driven projects rather than aspirational. The second one, I think, is quite successful because they want to visit our village. Now, you said that there are centres in somewhere that people don't use them. Well, we ran a taster course, and the guy had to bring 7 PCs up, and 12 people turned up, and they couldn't use them because there were too many people there. So there is a desperate need out there in the rural areas. So do you have any funding if I have a shortfall? I'm asking in other words.
Yeah. I mean, in truth, the digital inclusion unit doesn't have a budget. We work essentially without a budget. There is an amount of money that was made available 3 or 4 years ago. That's gone out to contract, and the organisations who are running Communities 2.0 have that money to run a contract. As I've said, in other areas, I mean, what I want to do is to try to solve problems, right? Is to try to come to solutions. And therefore, there are people in this room, and I'm going to mention Terry, but there are others as well, who know the funding streams that are available through which one can access funding. And it depends on what your needs are. I mean, our general analysis wasn't that there was kit available. Communities 2.0 has a funding stream. It doesn't just fund computers as such, though there is funding available in terms of packages of support for the right geographical areas, subject to the work that's been undertaken. But I think it is a case that you have to have conversations with each potential funder to see, and I know it's a pain, but yeah.
The Wales Cooperative Centre are helping me, don't get me wrong,
Right. Oh, well, that's good. Yeah. Okay.
Just in case I was sing out something.
Right. So, right, then there are 7 minutes to go. I'm going to attempt to summarize some other things, but we're now relying on the most fallible memory I know, which is mine. 1, we will build on the site that's been put up for this conference in order to use that as a basis for interacting with people in order that a forum or something can be set up so this dialogue can continue. 1. 2, we will take back the idea of county forms of organisation, because that seems to be the one solid one that has come out. And we can roll that through. We're already in discussions with the CVCs, so we can talk to them about it. Those CVCs at all sorts of different levels, but in the same way, local authorities at all sorts of different levels. So I think that might be almost a county-by-county approach rather than an edict from the centre, because I'm not sure that would necessarily work in that way. 3, we've taken a whole number of points here, such as the one I take from Matt about libraries and Facebook. We've got all of those listed, and when I've said we'll take those back to other bits of the Welsh Assembly Government, we will take those back to other bits of the Welsh Assembly Government. And I hope, as you realise, that we are very accessible people, so you can please contact us to find out if there's any particular things that we said that we were going to do to make sure that we've done them. 4, I don't think that there's been a clamour or even the suggestion that one has a solid physical stakeholder group. Because from what I've heard, it suggests that you can't conceivably have 200, 300, 400 people in a room. However, we don't rule out. I mean, so I guess what that leads me to is the fact that there are already networks in place. It's been suggested that structures already exist, that we should use those and we should primarily work through those as a means of engaging. If anybody in this room or are aware of networks with which we are not currently connecting, please contact us. Please say now, because that's our jobs. That's what we're paid to do. We are happy to engage with different sectors. The one I know that we are weakest on is our relationships with the private sector, but we are seeking to work through a set. I beg your pardon?
The SME market, the small to medium enterprises.
If the mic didn't pick that up, it was a suggestion that particularly small to medium enterprises. What I would say, I mean, I take that point. We are happy to work with SMEs. We are happy to work with all private sector organisations, from the BTs down to the smallest units of production or activity. So yeah, but if people have suggestions as to how we should go about doing that, then we'll be really, really open. And you know, we have there's colleagues here from Ystrad with whom we've developed a relationship over the last couple of weeks, and I'm going across to see them in Tredomen in about, I think, on the 20th of December. So we're really open to having those sorts of dialogues. But we will look to therefore develop the networks based upon currently existing networks as the way forward. Those are the things that immediately come to mind. If I've missed anything, please say. Richard, I think you wanted to...
It was just a point on using existing networks. They're quite disparate, and I'm a little bit... I'm thinking that maybe possibly don't abandon the idea of an all-embracing stakeholder group. Maybe something to bring together these disparate networks.
Virtually?
Virtually, or physically, because you can share things sometimes a lot easier, as we've seen with Mark. He would have rather have been here. Yeah. Because I think we do need...
It was you who said the idea of having 300 or 400 people.
And what I said was maybe behind or in front of a more strategic body, because I think there's a risk that we just go off on our own little path and don't return to this, which is a really important document as the Delivering Digital Wales, and maybe we all need to keep referring back to what we're trying to achieve rather than going off on our own.
Okay.
And in terms of an existing network, there's the Wales TUC Network of Excellence around skills and work-based learning, which might help with engaging with private sector as well, which is quite heavily involved in that.
So what we can, I'll need to think about this, right? One, because I don't know what's possible. Two, not least because the Welsh Assembly Government doesn't have the most open system, so I don't know what we're able to do from the Welsh Assembly Government. But from within the Wales Co-op Centre, we might be able to achieve something broader in terms of communicating with people. We will look and investigate, and I don't try to say this to push to one side, we will look to see how we can go about linking the different networks virtually, okay? Up to the points that feel appropriate. Because the idea of bringing 22 local authorities, 22 CVCs, 10,000 voluntary sector organisations, third sector organisations, it gets a bit cumbersome, right? But if we can see how we can link the third sector, and we could talk to the WCVA about this, and their networks, to the trade union networks, to One Voice Wales with the community councils, to see how we can start networking those things in.
This is what I mean, getting maybe the umbrella bodies, WCVA, the Chambers of Commerce, Trade Union, TFC, the local council, representatives, maybe at that level.
Yeah. So what's been suggested is bring it together, the WCVA, the heads of the CVCs, the heads of Chambers of Commerce, or whatever, together. I'm saying that, I'm repeating it for the mic in case people didn't hear it because he didn't have a mic when he spoke. Simon.
I just really wanted to add to that list, and it addresses the private sector one in some ways. And I think the Assembly government has probably got a good lever into this. This is business in the community.
Yeah.
I think they will be very valuable for exactly the fact that they exist to deliver corporate social, and their corporate social responsibility. And I was actually talking to, at the launch of Digital Wales yesterday, Alcatel-Lucent, massive sort of employer in South Wales, and what they're doing. And it was interesting to hear, yes, they go out and work with schools, but it wouldn't be a massive step for them to go, for these sorts of companies to go and then work into the homeless shelters, or to work with the third sectors that we've got represented here today. So I think there is some way that large companies, as well as the SMEs, can be brought into the private sector to help deliver this.
Thanks. And there's two final things, I guess, that I need to say. I referred to a delivery plan, and the Minister referred to a delivery plan. The comments that you've made here, the suggestions that you've made will now become part of a draft delivery plan. But as I said, that delivery plan needs to be an organic, a real living entity. So there's no reason why your comments about higher education and further education couldn't become a component part of it. The thing is, on the right-hand side, there's this thing that says, who's taking it forward? So at the moment, they mainly down to Digital Inclusion Unit, or Helen's gone, but the Library Service, or Communities 2.0. If we can say there are people in Swansea University or in the higher education sector that will take this forward for our education sector, great. If we can do that with older people's organisations, great. So it actually is a living, real entity. If Wolf want to have something in there around work-based learning, subject to our conversations with colleagues in skills, then great. I mean, so let's have that document, that delivery plan, not just to be the sum of our actions within government or within government-sponsored projects, but that which collectively can be taken forward. What I'd also suggest is my final thought then, in terms of timing, I mean, we're bumping up to Christmas now, so effectively it's going to happen before January. We're going to get the stats on the delivery plan, hopefully in December. So Andrew, Keris and myself will be working on that delivery plan in January. I would hope by February we're in a position where we've got something like a document which we can take to ministers. In about 2 or 3 months, therefore, what I suggest is that somehow we communicate with you, perhaps through Communities 2.0, about what we've done, what status it's at, and we can, as a basis for continuing this dialogue, rather than it stopping here. I mean, I hope what you genuinely sense is that we want to work and collaborate with everyone, because as we found out with your conversation, the knowledge is out there, not in here. Is that all right? Yeah? I've overrun by 1 minute and 55 seconds.
You're all right.
Is that okay?